Tristan. I am so glad to be back doing these reviews. I had to take about 8 months off. Work got crazy, and I've been focusing on other projects, other digital marketing projects, other distilleries, other bottlers, and weekends just got eaten up, and I just didn't have the time. I was traveling a little bit, and I woke up this morning and was like, I want to do these videos again. And my list keeps growing and growing, and doing these videos got me into Bourbon and House and blogging and just writing and sharing my experience. And it was the videos, 8-9 years ago at Elevate, that really launched me into doing this and driving my passion for whiskey. So I said, you know what, I'm just going to do one today. And this was at the top of the list, which is Old Grandad 86 proof. And I thought, I haven't done a bourbon in a while. I've been drinking a lot more scotch lately. And so I really wanted to revisit this, as I have opened it about, I think it was almost about a year ago. And it's about halfway done. So it's definitely had some time to breathe. Old Grandad, pound for pound, second only to Wild Turkey. I feel it's the best value you're going to find on the shelves right now. From Jim Beam, it's their high rye mash bill, 27% rye, so you could argue halfway in between Four Roses OBOE. So it definitely has got quite a bit of rye, as opposed to a lot of the contemporary bourbons, which I find to have lower rye mash bills, at least the ones that I've had. This bottle was actually gifted to me from a client back in 2015, and it's the 86 proof, which you actually can no longer get. This bottle was from around, I want to say, early 2000s to mid 2000s, which of course I wasn't drinking then because I wasn't 21. But I remember seeing this a few on the shelf right after I turned 21, and I was getting into whiskey, and of course I never bought one because there was so much other stuff, and I always passed it up, never picked one up. I picked up Bonded 114, but never the 86 proof. And so then a client came in one day and said, hey, I want you to have this bottle. And I'd sat on it for a couple of years and cracked it last year now, almost a year ago. And yeah, I thought I'd share my thoughts on it. And so let's pour a glass. Old Grandad is a very storied name in the bourbon world. There actually was an Old Grandad distillery founded in, I think, the 1880s by Old Grandad's grandson, Raymond Hayden, and he named it after his grandfather, Basil Hayden, which many of you might know from the bourbon Basil Hayden, also from Jim Beam. The other bourbon that encapsulates their high rye mash bill lineup, which is Old Grandad and Basil Hayden. I've always encouraged people, especially if they like Basil Hayden, to try Old Grandad, because you're getting more for your money, in that this is about half the cost, or a bottle of Bonded is less than half the cost of Basil Hayden, and it's not watered down to 80 proof. I won't say it's exactly the same, but it's virtually the same. Also, you're paying a lot for the Basil Hayden bottle. If you just look at a Basil Hayden bottle and look at an Old Grandad bottle, it's got the frumpy, really very dated, old school, gaudy orange. It's definitely been updated since then, but you're paying for what's inside. It's around $20, as opposed to Basil Hayden, which has the piece of paper wrapped around it with the metal. I mean, you're paying for that packaging. You're literally paying for less. You're paying for watered down Old Grandad when you buy Basil Hayden. So that's just my opinion. You drink what you want, but you'd be surprised how many people don't know that Old Grandad is Basil Hayden. So, yeah, that's the guy on the front who's now holding the shot glass. He's no longer looking that grizzly and old. I just love these old bottles. They have just the old picture of barrels being hauled away by ox, and yeah, I love just the no-nonsense bottle of Old Grandad. Always have. All right, review number 14, Old Grandad 86 proof. Old Grandad is revered in legend by a lot of bourbon guys, especially ones that go out and hunt Dusties. Those are some of the most desired and sought after bourbons out there. along with Wild Turkey, and of course a lot of older vintage Van Winkles and et cetera, Willets and whatnot. But old stuff that was around long before, Pappy Van Winkle was a thing. I mean, Old Grandad decanter bottles are go for a lot of money. I've tried a few and they're really, really good. I actually found an old bottle of Old Grandad in my grandfather's liquor cabinet after he passed away, and ended up giving it to a friend. I never even got to try it, but he said it was phenomenal. I wish I'd had some. But yeah, these older, I wouldn't even consider this a Dusty per se, although it is no longer available. Dusty, this is still post 2000, so I wouldn't really consider it a Dusty, although technically it might be, but it's not that old. Also, this is distilled by Jim Beam. This is not distilled by National Distillers, which is who was distilling Old Grandad before Jim Beam purchased it. So this is a Jim Beam Old Grandad. Old Grandad has that old-time feel. Even the newer bottlings have it, which are very, very rye heavy. I have found the rye really makes its presence known in the newer ones. This one is actually a lot sweeter. So although it's not quite like National Distillers juice, which makes just the most darkest, sultriest, sweet candy, cough, syrup, bomb bourbons, this is almost halfway in between, which is interesting. It makes me think maybe there was some stocks that were used in this from National Distillers. I doubt that, but it's possible. But if you were to compare this to today's 80 or 100 proof Old Grandad, there's almost no comparison. This is definitely different. It's an old-fashioned style nose. It smells bolder than 86 proof. I would honestly put this at least 90, if not 100 proof. Shoe polish, charred marshmallow, candied walnuts, some Heath bar. It's oddly sour in certain areas, not in a bad way, but it goes beyond the citrus that you get. It's just, it packs this real sour punch in different corners. I mean, sweet and sour, it's almost like 50-50. It's really, it's not a incredibly multi-dimensional nose. I would consider this just a historic nose, because it's really the last of what the sweeter Old Granddads used to smell like before they became what they are today. Yeah, it's an overall great nose. I mean, this is a good nose. I wouldn't call it stellar, but it's a very good. On the palate, silky, but it is a little sharp. I think it's probably, there's no cork in this too. I think it's probably gone down past its prime in terms of oxidization. Some nut butter, some butterscotch candies, polished oak. There's that cough syrup, which is a very common thing in a lot of these older granddads. Not that that's a bad thing, because people, when they think cough syrup, they think artificial sweetness, but it's more of a comforting sweetness. It's hard to describe. Usually when you're taking medicine, that's not always the most comforting thing, although medicine is to help you. But I remember hating the taste of cough syrup when I was younger. But as it translates to this, it's a very, it's something that you'd have to try an Old Grandad to really understand. But for those of you that have, you know what I'm talking about. There's this mellow bitterness, which again, I think has contributed from the oxidization, or the oxidization has contributed to that. It probably wasn't quite that bitter. Again, being only 86 proof. It's lacking a lot of the complexity that the nose had. However, I think that, again, for an 86 proof bourbon, this does have a lot of character to it. Finish is probably the most disappointing part of this bourbon. Short to medium. I mean, medium at best, but it's barely pushing into medium. Already now, I'm a little bit left of that butterscotch, some Werther's candies, those like butterscotch candies, or a little caramel too, and again, a little more cough syrupy sweetness. It definitely has a very viscous, textured overall mouthfeel. Even right now, it's just, the coating is still there, the oils are still there, but it doesn't leave you with a lot left to desire on the palate. However, the nose and the palate are, beyond a doubt, great. I mean, this is a good bourbon. I would rate this right at 81. If the finish had been better, I would have put this more into a solid B bourbon, but it's got a lot of heritage to it. I'll put it that way. However, you know, I wouldn't spend a lot of money on this. If you saw this and are a fan of bourbon, you're probably going to jump on it, but I would not spend more than $50 on this as a piece of bygone history that, being that old granddad doesn't taste like this anymore. It's great to have and to compare to the current releases, but for what you're getting for the value, it's kind of an odd, it's just an odd expression from them. I always thought 86 proof was kind of, better than 80 proof, personally, I believe. However, the bonded from these years, I've never tried, so I'd be really curious to compare this to the 100 proof from the early 2000s and the 90s. I've had stuff from the 80s and 70s, which is phenomenal, phenomenal, but this is definitely a couple notches below that, but still good. It's definitely still good. I highly recommend any old granddads, if you ever see them, anything like this, especially if it's the 114 proof, definitely pick them up. Any kind of special decanter bottlings, which will be almost impossible to find. And if you do, they'll probably be at auction and a lot of money. But yeah, give it a shot. If you ever see any on the shelf, the bonded, again, pound for pound behind Wild Turkey, is one of the best bourbons on the market. I guess I'll end this by saying thank you, Raymond Hayden, for starting the distillery after your grandfather. His heritage lives on. And thank you, Jim Beam, for distilling this 86 proof expression. Cheers.